All right, Judy Schwartz, wonderful to see you. It's been too long, so I'm really glad you're here to catch up with me this afternoon.
Great, thank you.
Yep, good to see you. And as mentioned, I've got a few questions teed up. We're going to dive into a conversation about Danone. There's someone at my door. Please hold.
Okay.
Well, so that was the delivery from Thrift Books with 2 books I just got. So sorry for that interruption, but very excited to get to some more reading. Speaking of books, more to say on that in a moment. Thank you for being here for my first so far interview on Danone for materiality. And as I mentioned, I do have some questions prepared, but before I dive into all that, I thought it'd be great if you could tell us whatever you'd like to know about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I'm a journalist, writer living in Vermont. And yeah, so I've been on a kind of interesting trajectory. Around 2008, I started asking some questions. So I leapt into writing about economics, which is something I never studied. And that led to writing a book about soil, which led to writing a book about water, which led to writing a book about the growing global ecosystem restoration movement. So basically, I'm kind of looking at what's missing from many of our conversations, our public conversations. So for example, the most recent book, The Reindeer Chronicles, was prompted by the realization that what is missing from our conversations about climate is the role of healthy ecosystems in climate regulation, because we know we can restore even extensive damaged ecosystems. So we can reclaim, we can rebuild much of that regulation capacity. And that's really not in our conversations that are dominated by CO2 and the notion of emissions in general.
I love it. And actually, so I always ask myself then to disclose how we're connected in the spirit of transparency. And so I will say we're friends and colleagues. We met in the GRC, the Global Regeneration Collab. And one of the things that made me want to knock on your door and connect further was having read The Reindeer Chronicles. So anybody listening to this, cannot recommend it enough for 2 simple reasons on my end. One is that we just so often hear, well, how's this going to work? All these things we have to do. What's it going to be, this transformation? And you've so openly and accessibly chronicled some of the ways that it's already happening. So it's a very practical bunch of stories that you pulled together. And then the other thing that I really find helpful, and I don't know about you, but this shifting the narrative towards what we can do, what we are doing, what's working well, as opposed to the doom scrolling that doesn't feel very good, and I don't think it really helps us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's deeply appreciated. And the other thing I always like to ask basically my friends, this project is me interviewing my friends, anybody that I interview, I just like to ask if you have any commercial relationship with the company we're about to talk about. So anything we should know about you and Danone?
No.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, with that, let's just jump into the questions themselves. And I'm going to start quite broadly before we get into some nitty gritty about the company. And so you would know, we see so many kind of pieces of jargon out there about what the future will be, sustainable development, regenerative future, regenerative agriculture, all kinds of words get thrown around, and sometimes they have fun things attached to them. I think it'd be much more fun to hear in your words, what is the future you want?
Oh, wow. A future in which we acknowledge we are part of nature and we operate in harmony with nature. And in terms of food, because I'm, thinking food, because this is a food company, that like the product, the thing, the yogurt or whatever they make, we think of this as things, but after writing a book about soil, I've come to understand food more as part of a process. So it's the yield of biological processes and understanding that. So, um, yeah, I mean, the world that, yeah, well, basically a world that I would like to see because of where we are now is a world in which the purpose of our companies and of our basically of our lives is to heal the earth
Mhm.
because it needs healing. And in healing the earth, we will be healing ourselves.
Mhm.
And by changing our purpose from seeking and generating profits to seeking and generating ecological health, everything will change. So when
Mm.
that becomes rewarded, that becomes the mission of companies and people when people have opportunities to do that, because right now people coming into the workforce, that isn't an option. And we
Mhm.
need to give that's work that we need to start looking at work that needs to be done as opposed to work that will yield profits and keep our system going
Yeah.
as it is.
Yeah. Just hearing that future, I feel more calm and expansive. So thank you. That's really beautiful. And if you can hold that as a sort of thought bubble as we go through the next questions, that'll be really helpful. And feel free to add to it or embellish as we go. We're going to jump into the company Danone itself. And as I prefaced, and I'll just make sure it's clear out loud in the recording that yes, we're talking about global food company Danone, and potentially also just wider food systems. And we'll be as clear about where we are as we go as possible, knowing a lot of what we might say about this one company could relate to the whole global industrial food system. And so with that future as a thought bubble, when you think about positive impacts in relation to Danone and that future that you just described, what would be some examples of positive impacts that the company is doing to create that future? Any examples, evidence,
Oh, you
specific
mean what they are doing or what they could do?
what they are doing right now? So based on
Oh,
current reality,
so
how does Danone create that
yeah.
future?
So I don't know a lot about what they're doing, but a couple of things that I'm aware of. So living in Vermont,
Mm.
I am aware that they canceled their contracts with many dairy farms in Vermont that really, really created a lot of consternation, a lot of fear, and it was considered very abrupt.
Mm.
So that concerns me because I guess what could be done, and I don't know if they're doing this, is our food is about relationships. It's about relationships in the soil. It's about relationships between the animals and the earth, relationships between the providers and the company. So a focus on, anyway, that seemed like a real
Yeah.
violation of trust and relationships. So I just
Mhm.
have to put that out there because that's what I hear about the company.
Do you by any chance know what prompted that?
Profit, like because the dairy industry. So problem with the dairy industry in Vermont is that so much attention has been going towards propping up a system that is no longer working,
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
rather than looking at the system how it might be otherwise.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
Huh.
yeah, there we are. But the problems of that, the problems, I mean, of farms that have been in business for couple of hundred years, like not knowing what they could do. I mean, the dairy industry is a mess here. There's just
Mm.
no question about it. But perhaps there would have been other ways.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. And so, I mean, in principle, this question is about, what are some of the positive impacts? But of course, on the heels of that, I'm going to be asking what are the negative impacts. So let's just roll around there a little bit further, positive or negative. What do you see as the impacts what I'm looking for here is you describe that future that you would like to see. And I'm wondering how you see this current model either contributing to or undermining that future. And so what I
Yeah,
just read there sounds like some undermining, like
yeah,
breaking relationships and
yes,
trust.
yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So I am not a customer of Danone. I mean, you know what? I can't say that because I don't know how wide their reach is,
Mm,
in terms of, I think of a yogurt container with their label on it. I
yeah.
do not buy because I buy from farms that are regenerative dairy farms.
Mm, mhm,
And because I can afford the extra dollar or two, and then the profit goes to my local health food store.
mm.
No one's getting rich off my purchases, I know that.
Right.
But then I'm supporting this alternative way of farming, which is relationship based, which is in deep relation to the soil and the health of the animals.
Mhm,
And having written, I've written a lot about animal land dynamics.
mhm.
And I guess I imagine that a company like Danone is kind of in a tough spot, like almost on the back foot because there's so much negative assumptions about cows.
Mhm.
And the book about soil that I wrote is called Cows Save the Planet. So let's own it. Let's own
Yeah.
the the potential positive impact of livestock
Yeah.
on the globe, on our landscapes. That if they're in a barn and their waste is going into lagoons, which generates methane, and there's no positive impact now, but holistically managed
Yeah.
livestock, it's a very different approach.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it can be done in every context at a price point that would
Mm,
be competitive, but it can be done.
mhm. Yeah, that's so interesting. If you look at Danone's brand positioning, not at the individual yogurt level on the retail shelf, but at the kind of wider, let's say, sustainability corporate dialogue, one of their strengths is how much they focus on plant-based. So they're one of the bigger kind of plant-based, offering vegan and vegetarian options, and they're really growing in that area. So it's particularly interesting and I think important to hear your perspective on what you've actually seen working that isn't that.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, the plant-based thing has me really, really concerned.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, the notion that we can float above like the actual reality of animals and like of animals living and dying
Yeah.
and animals, but our land, animals have create our landscapes. So
Mhm.
let's work with those animals and create healthy landscapes.
Mhm.
The notion that we can have a thriving earth of plants without animals is ludicrous. And
Yeah.
then what, the plant-based thing, how much of that is cultured, is high energy intensive. It's everyone wants something that's clean.
Yeah.
Not clean. The
Yeah.
earth is not clean.
Yeah.
Biology isn't clean.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. And as somebody, so we haven't talked much about this and perhaps for another time, but as somebody who used to eat a lot of meat and then I was plant-based for about a decade and I've recently returned to eating meat and there's a whole backstory to that. I can just see how frankly easy it is to buy into a narrative. And what you said in Cows Save the Planet made me very uncomfortable. And now I'm like, ooh, I no longer have that discomfort. I welcome it. And I think, how do we get past that discomfort and confusion? Frankly, there's a lot of confusion out there. So,
Yeah, exactly. And I think that confusion is a symptom of our collective, in countries like, Canada and the US, are disconnection from the land and
Yeah.
therefore nature. What
Yeah.
what happens, how things work.
Yeah. Yep. And I'm gonna sneak a tiny bit off script here and ask, given your experience, like hands-on, seeing things actually working well and landscapes being restored, have you experienced any large food companies playing a role in that, Danone or otherwise? Like, are you aware of any
Yeah.
of those folks actually essentially funding it or making it happen?
Yeah, making it happen. I know there's a dairy company, I think Alexander something, in California, that has signed on to the Savory Institute's
Hmm.
Land to Market program.
Mm-hmm.
So that is, and that's when a company works with them, they get the land to market accreditation, and it's based on outcomes
Mm.
of, of ecological outcomes. It's not about intention. It's not about practices.
Mm.
Often people get, like really hooked on practices.
Yeah.
The practices it's always context based.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is no formula. Another company, I know that their intentions are, there's a big push in Land O'Lakes. That's, I think,
Okay.
more on the scale of Danone. I just don't know the details of what they're
Yeah.
doing.
Hmm.
And when
Interesting.
companies are involved, I don't know what form that takes, whether it's carbon credits or whether it's
Mhm.
actual on the land transformation.
Yeah, I think that's a key question. And when you talked about practices, one of the things I've seen, and I haven't circled back to this in the last few years, but about 5 years ago when I was digging into the corporate regenerative agriculture journey, it was very prescriptive. It was like, here's how you have to farm now. It has to be regenerative. And it's like, as you say, context, even, if you open up the Reindeer Chronicles, like the context for each of those stories is geographically and culturally very different. And that seems to be, it's not even that nuanced, but it's hard for corporations to
Mhm,
codify that in some way they can grasp. So
mhm.
yeah. Okay, I'm going to push us forward and I'm going to ask you, I'm going to share my screen here and I'm going to undertake an exercise that is ridiculously simplistic and linear and not altogether useful, but I do it anyway because I found that the discussions end up being quite useful. So bear with me as I try to get the right screen showing to you. Tell me if you see a slide that has your name on it and a little
Yes.
2x2 grid. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to ask you to help me place this bubble here. This bubble represents Danone. And I'm going to explain what the axes are and we'll just sound it out. And you can resist, or you can tell me to place it in 20 places, or you can rearrange the exercise as you like, but I'll just frame it and see what you think. So the horizontal axis represents ecosystem health. And anything above the line is that the company is contributing to the ecosystem's health, to that future that you described.
Mhm,
Anything below the line is undermining.
mhm,
And on the horizontal axis, we've got the impact on society's health. Anything to the left of the line is undermining society's health. Anything to the right, they are contributing to society's health, to that future you described.
mhm.
And so based on your understanding of how Danone exists today, my question to you is, where would you suggest this bubble wants to be and why?
So I would put it like, it's like 1.5 notches negative on both. Okay.
Like
And
about there?
this is completely uneducated because I have not studied the company, but just my guess is that they're not as bad as others. Um, but I am concerned about the health impacts of the plant-based, because I know that a lot of the stock is, you know, industrial
Mhm.
industrially produced. And I know that there's sugar in a lot because
Mm,
packaged food companies, you know, I mean, everything does have high sugar, and I don't know about the quality of the fats. I
mm,
know that, like, food companies are supposed to avoid fats, but we need
mm,
healthy fats.
mhm,
But dairy has some healthy fats, so I
mhm,
don't. So anyway, so like I said, it's just a guess. And ecosystem health, again, it's industrial, so it's negative. So it should probably go a little bit more negative, and everything's transported over long distances. Um, Monocultures are
mm,
not conducive to ecosystem health.
mhm,
I don't know the degree of pesticides. I don't know the you know how the cattle are treated.
mm,
I can see opportunities. So for societal health, um, I'm learning about something called A2 milk, that there's an A2 protein
mm,
that is more healthful, and that could be an opportunity to provide A2 milk. Maybe they do already,
mm,
or goat milk or sheep's
mhm,
milk, and then
mhm.
those animals can be managed holistically and revive the landscapes. And I've seen this happen. I mean, within 20 minutes of me, there's a regenerative sheep farm,
Mm,
and that I have, it's not big enough to be a a cattle dairy farm,
mm.
but I've seen that land transform from
Wow.
basically concrete, because it was a horse boarding place.
Yep.
And everything, the soil was compacted. Now it's lush, and I love going there. Every visitor to my home, we go there so we can look at all the butterflies, and just
Wow.
the lushness of the landscape.
Oh,
um yeah, I mean, I could see lots of opportunities for them to address ecosystem health, but
mhm.
um I don't imagine that they're bringing any benefit to ecosystem health at this point.
Yeah.
And if,
Okay.
yeah, it might be a matter of trying to do less harm.
Mhm, mhm. Helpful. And for the sake of this exercise, do you feel I've got this in the right spot, or would you see it moved in one direction or another? I moved it down a little when you said maybe a little less on the ecosystem side.
Yeah.
Or does
Yeah,
it feel like
probably
it's
a little left on the horizontal too.
yeah,
So,
both there?
yeah, I think so.
Okay. Great. Thank you for humoring that exercise. And you've actually already created a great segue into the next one. So there's just a couple more things I want to ask you about. And these are really scenarios, and they're totally imagination based. So we can go wherever we want with them. The first one is that I just got a very exciting piece of news, and that is that you are in charge of the whole universe.
Yay.
I know, that's
It's
what I
about
was like, oh my
time.
goodness. And so nothing's in the way. There are no limits, no barriers. Absolutely everything is possible with you in charge. And so with that, my question for you is, what would you change at this company?
I would change its mission
Mm,
to serve it would add to their, you know, providing food products, to be in service to ecological, human and animal health.
mhm,
And so, yeah, and there are lots of things that can be done. Just a real small example, just like pop it in there. So every farm that they work with, a certain quarter acre, something like that, or depending on the side, it could be larger depending on the side, can be dedicated to habitat for at-risk native pollinators.
mm,
Because
mhm,
in the industrial food system that we have, these pollinators and the plants they feed on, I mean, the pollinators have no home,
mm,
and so and no food supply. And that would be so easy for them to do, and it would be such an opportunity for storytelling and yeah.
Oh, yeah. Any other changes? I mean, you've seen real change in action. Are there any other big levers you'd want to switch there?
Yeah, well, I've mentioned the holistic management of livestock, but
Mhm.
not really gone into the benefits. So that would, I mean, really enhance animal health. So you know, uh, just to let you know, so I've been to ranches all over the world,
Mm,
Mexico, Africa, lots of places in the US and Canada. I don't know. I guess I haven't been to any ranches in Canada, but I've talked to ranchers. And I've been to the new cowgirl camp. So I learned how to do this.
cool.
Um, yeah. And um, yeah, the benefits to biodiversity, to land health, which is huge because so many places are experiencing droughts and floods. But if you have
Yeah.
richer, more carbon full soil, which holistically managed animals creates the conditions for, you don't flood. It's harder to make a flood
Hmm.
and you're holding on to moisture. So in Mexico, the ranchers that I was observing, they had grass growing and lots of healthy cattle where nearby the cattle were skinny and the land looked awful.
Hmm.
And they were saying, well, you get more rain. But it's a matter of holding on to the rain.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
Mhm.
anyway, the benefits are just so much.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, yeah. Okay, well, thank you. Unfortunately, it turns out that was just a fake rumor. You're not really in charge of the universe. But I did just get another headline that's not quite as good, but it gives us a little glimpse, which is that there's been a bunch of leadership changes at Danone. This is real life. Been a bunch of leadership changes. I actually can't quite keep up. I got to go back and do some homework. And you're my first interview, so bear with me. But the scenario here is you have the ear of the CEO, or I believe it might be co-CEOs right now, because they ousted their former CEO, and the rumor is because he was saying too much about regenerative ag. But we're going to track down those rumors. All to say, you have the ear of senior leadership. They take your calls. They want to know what you think. The thing is, they're super busy, what with rebuilding the leadership team of a global food company. So they've only got 30 seconds. What do you say in 30 seconds to spark that future you want?
Mhm. That you have the opportunity to be at the leading edge of food companies advancing ecological health and human health. And that could be part of your messaging, and you can have realizable impact that you can show, and that enhances the health of communities and
Mm,
the people who buy your products and the landscapes that you work in.
love it. And they might just hear that. So thank you. Um, that was also fake news, I'm afraid. It's just you and me here sharing our thoughts. And those are all the questions that I prepared for you. Other than to ask, is there anything I didn't ask you about that you think is important as we consider a global food company and this future that you want? Anything you want to put on the table or questions for me?
Yeah, mostly just that food is the pivot,
Mm,
that it's a yield of biological processes, and those processes can enhance the landscape or harm the landscape. And I
mhm.
guess one other thing is that when we're talking about dairy and animals is respect for indigenous cultures that are pastoralists. So all over the world. So I don't know the Danone's land, what land they have all over the world, but there's so much to be learned about animals and health, the
Mm.
health of the animals, and how animals can be managed to be in harmony with our landscapes from these people. So just don't forget the pastoralists who are often under tremendous threat,
Mhm.
and one can learn from them. I'm thinking of this, I'm aware of this because 2026 is going to be the International Year of Pastoralists.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm in touch with mostly through a German woman who fell in love with camels and has written a book about camels, is writing a book about global herding.
Huh.
And camel milk is incredibly healthful.
Hmm.
And camels can have such a beneficial impact on landscapes that are currently degrading in dryland ecosystems.
Hmm. Wow. You're reminding me that there's the things that we think we need to be thinking about, and then there's things we actually need to be thinking about, and a lot of them are out of our sight. So really appreciate you bringing that forward. Any other messages or comments you want to leave us with before we sign off and I give you back some of your afternoon?
No, I think that's good. Yeah,
Awesome.
thank
Well,
you. Yeah, we've been all over to camel country, to Vermont dairy farms and Mexico, and yeah,
to the new cowgirls. I love it.
that's right.
Well, Judy Schwartz, thank you very much. I'll pause the recording here, but really, really appreciate your time and insights. It's great to hear your thoughts.
Thank you.